Hi, everyone. Thanks so much for joining us tonight for the third panel discussion in our Issues in Post-Secondary Education series. In this discussion, we'll have the opportunity to talk about the issues of precarious work for students, faculty, and staff at Ryerson, including the difficulty of entering the academy, current labor relations at Ryerson, and the issues facing migrant workers on campus. I'm joining everyone tonight from Ottawa, unceded Algonquin territory, where I have had the wonderful opportunity to live and work on and off for the past 15 years. And I'll also know that Ryerson is in the dish with one spoon territory, and we invite you to look up the land that you're on in the Indigenous nations and treaties that are the caretakers of it. Go to native-land.ca to use their simple tool to find the information. Before I introduce our panelists, I'm going to take a quick moment to introduce myself. My name is David Simao, and I am the chair of CUPE Ontario's university sector, representing over 30,000 workers on 16 campuses across Ontario. I'm also proud to be vice president of CUPE 1281, as well as a staff member at CUPE 3902, representing contract academic workers at the University of Toronto. Before we get into our discussion, I'm going to introduce our panelists. And thanks so much to our speakers for joining us. First up, we have Sarom Rho. Sarom is an organizer with Migrant Workers Alliance for Change and Migrant Students United. Migrant Students United consists of current and former international students who are organizing for decent jobs, open work permits, access to social supports and healthcare, and full immigration status for all. Over 12,000 have signed their petition calling for COVID-19 crisis support specific to international students' needs. And you can visit migrantrights.ca/migrant students. Next up, we have Amber Grant. Amber is a PhD candidate in environmental applied science and management at Ryerson University. Her research focuses on examining environmental justice in urban forest management and community tree planting practice. Beyond her research work, she is also the CUPE 3904 Unit 3 Chief Steward, representing TAs and GAs, lab monitors, and invigilators at Ryerson University. She is also the Vice President of Education and Research for Ryerson Graduate Students Union. Amber is a progressive leader on campus and is a strong advocate for creating meaningful graduate student work experiences and research opportunities. Last but certainly not least, Jared Ong is a caseworker and community organizer with the Workers' Action Center. As part of the Fight for 15 and Fairness campaign, he's been working on empowering communities in the GTA to push for decent work legislation, such as raising the minimum wage, fair schedules, and paid sick days. With CERB ending and workplaces still not open or safe, Jared's recently focused on advocating for an overhaul of employment insurance that is accessible for all and enough to live on. Before we begin, I'd like to give a quick shout out to the organizers of the Issues in Post-Secondary Education panel series. The Continuing Education Students Association of Ryerson, known as CESAR, representing over 17,000 students registered in continuing education, distance education, off-campus, and part-time degree courses at Ryerson University. The Ryerson Faculty Association, the certified bargaining unit for tenure-track faculty, limited-term faculty, librarians, and counselors at Ryerson University. The Ryerson Graduate Students Union, supporting Ryerson's graduate students through their academic pursuits, program-specific initiatives, and host networking events. The Jack Layton Chair at Ryerson University promotes progressive social change and strengthening political capacity at Ryerson University. The Canadian Federation of Students is the largest student organization in Canada, representing over 530,000 student members at 62 student unions across Canada. And with that all said, let's get started. I'm going to begin with individual questions, and my first question will be for Sarom. Sarom, international students commonly report experiencing precarious employment and poor labor conditions. What are some of the ways international students and migrant workers are treated unfairly before and during COVID, and some of the ways folks are organizing to fight back?
Thanks, David. That's a good question, and I'm so glad that I can be on this panel to unpack this. So right now, we have seen time and time again that COVID-19 has exposed the crisis in our systems. And right now, migrant students, which includes current international students on study permits, as well as former international students who have graduated, who are now on the postgraduate work permit, and all those who are in transition between visas and those who have already lost status, migrant students, as well as migrant workers, are directly impacted by broken provincial labor laws and broken federal immigration laws. So one very glaring example is that during COVID-19, on the same day that the Canadian Canada Emergency Student Benefit was announced, which excluded international students from applying, the IRCC removed the restrictions on work hours for international students who are working on essential services. So one of the conditions of the study permit for international students is that they can only work 20 hours off campus, unlimited on campus. Campuses are closed, so the unlimited hours of work on campus is not applicable. And outside of campus, there's a general lack of jobs right now. But IRCC removed this restriction on work hours, which has been a long-standing demand from migrant students, at their own discretion based on the needs of serving the economy, right? So the combination of the two announcements on this day was that we won't give you income supports, but we want you to work more in order to survive. On top of that, because international students face discriminatory tuition, or what is called differential tuition, the tuition increases that we're seeing all over Canada during a pandemic disproportionately affects them. One of our members who is organizing a Migrant Students United chapter in Newfoundland at the Memorial University of Newfoundland said that even if they were able to get the $2,000 like other or the $1,250 like other students, the way that they can use that breaks down differently because the tuition is different. So we're seeing here that there are so many ways that these rules, provincial labor laws and federal immigration laws, are working in tandem to produce an environment, conditions where students are having to work and having to work without access to basic rights. Some of these rights don't even include healthcare for those who have graduated. For graduated international students who are on postgraduate work permits, they're only eligible for OHIP if they have a full-time job for a minimum of 6 months. So work is deeply tied to status here for migrant students. The same is for migrant workers. And in our national campaign, we are one coordinated body of migrant students, migrant farm workers, migrant care workers, sex workers, refugees, and undocumented people, because we know that it's a multi-tiered immigration system that is fundamentally broken and is causing a human rights catastrophe that we are fighting against. So we have been just escalating actions through the crisis. We had a massive national mobilization on June 14th, and then a rally in front of the Minister of Immigration's constituency office on July 4th. And when Parliament is returning on August 26th for one day, the Sunday before August 26th, which is August 23rd, we are having a Status for All rally, again, in order to continue the momentum. Because we know that migrant student leaders and worker leaders are there right now, committed to take risks and fight for status for all without exclusion and exception, because that's the only way to address the inequalities and the injustices that have been exacerbated by COVID.
Thank you so much for that, Sarom. And it's quite clear we have a lot of work to do to support our migrant students and workers. Now I'm going to go over to Amber. Amber, what is the status and future of Unit 3 jobs at Ryerson? Are other QP units affected by COVID-19?
Yeah, again, a good question. So currently, it's technically the summer term at Ryerson. So there are fewer courses being offered, which means there are fewer Unit 3 jobs available on campus, and that's just largely just related to the way that the semesters are structured. So most of the Unit 3 jobs happen in the fall and winter terms. And to be specific for folks who don't know what the Unit 3 jobs includes, that's the teaching assistants, which are undergraduate students at Ryerson, graduate assistants, which are graduate students at Ryerson, and invigilators and lab monitors are part of that unit. However, the fall 2020 term is about to start, and there is an underlying assumption that there's actually going to be an increase in Unit 3 work. At least that's what the union is holding right now, because there has been an increase in enrollment for the fall term. even despite COVID. There's also a greater number of RFA and tenure track faculty teaching courses in this upcoming term. So there are fewer Unit 1 positions or QP 3904 positions being offered. This is largely due because the university actually hasn't been really fulfilling their duty to have tenure track faculty be teaching in these roles. So the exact math on that is about 72% of the courses are supposed to be taught by tenure track faculty, and 28% are supposed to be taught by QP or contract workers, according to the collective agreements. But it's been, probably closer to 50 or 60% of the courses being taught by contract workers. So a decrease in that has increased in the TAGA roles. However, some of the implications around this is that it will disproportionately affect international students or international graduate student workers in particular. This is largely because, especially the students who I guess moved back to their home countries and are no longer in Canada. There's an assumption within the administration that these students might not have access to internet or cannot participate in synchronous learning due to time zone restrictions. So the issue there is that students who might be anticipating work for the fall term might not receive it, and there'll be an over-reliance on domestic students for the fall semester. However, heading into the winter term, if COVID-19 is under more control by then, there'll be an effort to, according to the administration, hire those international students. And I guess what the administration is saying is that whatever they promised the international students in terms of their stipends that they receive upon entering their programs, they'll receive that money. However, all those hours, might come in one semester, which is for academics can be really challenging and put a lot of pressure on international students to, really rejig their schedules to have to do maybe there more academics in one semester and more work in the next, which is really unfortunate. The other thing with Unit 3 is that there's been a creation of jobs, 2 new, jobs that have been created under Unit 3 as a result of COVID-19. So kind of unusual, but instead of invigilators, there's going to be what's kind of called like safety monitors, I guess, and they'll be monitoring social distancing and different safety requirements in classrooms. Instead of, regular invigilators would be monitoring academic integrity. And there's also been course technology assistance positions created, which are essentially, graduate students there to support undergraduate students with tech-related questions. The implication with this is that we kind of fear that these jobs in particular might be used as a loophole to not hire TAs and GAs, which are paid at a significantly higher rate. So our fear is that those might get manipulated a little bit. So that's something that the union's pretty aware of, and we're holding the school accountable with that. And then there's the whole issue with Navitas as well, which I think some Ryerson students might be familiar with, but there's certainly an increase to, because of the forward cuts especially, and just the way education is going about, I guess, to privatize education and recruit more international students, which puts more Unit 3 work might get created as a result of that, hopefully. But again, it's not exactly what we're really so fully seeing across the campus in this exact moment. In terms of Unit 1, there has been a decrease. So that's the day school lecturers. There has been a decrease in work, but not necessarily as a result of COVID-19. That's more so related to the forward cuts and to the RFA grieving their collective agreement issues that they've had over the years, as well as Unit 2. There's been an increase in work, again, related to the enrollment increase at the Chang School. So that's kind of the brief synopsis to what's going on with QP at Ryerson.
Thanks so much for those insights, Amber. Moving on to our friend Jared. Jared, how is a lack of mandated sick leave and fair income benefits impacting workers under COVID, and how are workers organizing in response?
Hey everyone, how's everyone doing? So my name is Jared. I'm an organizer with the Workers Action Center. And, a lot of workers are facing a really tough choice under COVID because a lot of people are disproportionately being impacted. In Toronto Public Health recently released data around who's being most impacted. And it's young workers, it's women, it's racialized workers, disproportionately who are also working precarious low-wage work. Because a lot of their work is being, they can't be done from home. They face the double impact of not only losing their jobs due to the lockdown of non-essential businesses, but also that they are forced to leave their homes in order to work essential frontline work, and as a result, be more exposed to COVID, right? So half of COVID-19 cases in Toronto were disproportionately in low-income households, although only 30% of Toronto is considered low income, and 80% of COVID-19 cases in Toronto are from racialized households, while only 50% identify as racialized. So, a lot of people talk about we need vaccines, we need more hospital beds, we need more PPEs. One thing that the campaign is very wants to raise is that, we can't fight public health without addressing systemic racism, without addressing economic inequality at the same time. So these two things go hand in hand with COVID-19. To that end, two things that we're very strongly fighting for. One of them is paid sick days. The medical community knows that paid sick days reduces transmission of flu. And yet, 2 months ago, Justin Trudeau promised that no worker will be forced to go to work sick. 2 months later, nothing has happened. No province has mandated this 10 paid sick day policy. And what they are planning is temporary. It's only going to last 6 months. It's narrowly defined. It's only going to cover COVID-19, and it's going to be government provided rather than employer provided. And I just want to expand about that point as well. The reason why we're pushing for employer provided paid sick days is twofold. One, already with CERB, folks had a hard time applying for it. They didn't know how to apply. They didn't know whether the application is accepted. And even if they applied for it, it took a while before it came, a lot of them got paid. Compared to if it's employer provided and it comes to the next paycheck, they know that if a worker is sick, they're able to pay their rent coming up. Especially for people working paycheck to paycheck to paycheck, not knowing whether you're going to be able to pay your next month's rent is a big deal, right? So this is why employer paid sick days are very important. And more importantly, and more broadly for my socialist leanings, is that, why are we subsidizing giant corporations like Walmart, Amazon, Costco's, Loblaws? They should pay their fair share. This should not be another government handout. And the second thing that we're pushing for is not only paid sick days, but an overhaul of the employment insurance system. Right now, too many people cannot qualify for employment insurance. Around 60% of people paid into EI in 2018, and 60% of people were ineligible to actually get EI in 2016. People don't get enough hours to qualify it, especially if you're a student, especially if you're working part-time, especially if you're a temp worker. And even if you do qualify, if you were working full-time at $14 minimum wage in Ontario, around 30 to 35 to 40 hours, you would make about $500 a week. CERB is also $500 a week. So if you're unemployed, you have something to get by. Basically, you're getting by on minimum wage. If we switch to the old system of EI, which is 55% of your income, your benefits are going to drop to $275 a week, which is not enough to get by on. So, Trudeau says that it's going to cover everyone. Nobody's going to be left behind. If we don't seriously overhaul the EI system, a lot of people will be left behind, and that includes gig workers who don't qualify for EI at all, self-employed and misclassified workers. So if you want to join in with us, August 18th, we're going to have a next online organizing meeting. Check out our Facebook, Fair Wages Now. And also we're going to August 29th, we're having our monthly and day of action for paid sick days. So those are things that folks can join in and get organized with.
All right, thanks so much, Jared, and thanks so much to our three panelists for answering those individual questions. So we are going to move on to general questions now, and during this segment of our panel, I would invite our panelists at any time, if you want to answer one of the questions, please feel free to jump in. If the audience has any questions, please feel free to ask those questions, and those questions will make their way to me. So first question. How does precarious work disproportionately impact Black people, Indigenous people, people of color, and immigrants who are students and workers on university campuses? And any of you can jump in. You don't have to put up your hand or anything. Feel free to take a couple of seconds to think about it.
Yeah, I guess I just have like a couple of points to say. I mean, I'm not a part of those communities, I think, obviously. So I don't want to necessarily speak on behalf of them. And admittedly, QP doesn't have any kind of data on the reality of what these types of students are facing. But of course, BIPOC students experience systemic and institutional barriers that make it a lot more difficult for them to receive work. Whether this is, also like university campuses can just be really unsafe environments for some folks. So like a particular example might be, of course, related to policing, whether that's, campus security or police officers over policing folks from these communities. Coming to campus could be a potential barrier to receiving work in the first place, or accessing any source of jobs that might be available on campus. So I guess just to start the conversation, highlight some of the barriers that exist for folks from these communities.
Absolutely, and if I can just jump in, one of the members of our organizing team of self-organized and self-led migrant students made this excellent point that we have to look at the division of labor. So when we look at immigration and labor together, we have to look at how it gets stratified along those lines. So again, students can, international students can work unlimited hours on campus, but the jobs that are often available to them are ones that are in service industries. So one of our members said, my friends and I, we don't get accepted for jobs in libraries or any kind of affirmative work on campus because a lot of these are only for Canadian students or those with permanent residency. And instead, we're asked to work at the Tim Hortons or the Subway or the Pizza on campus. Additionally, we know that a lot of migrant women work in cleaning. And when universities and colleges and these education institutions subcontract out labor, a lot of the precariously employed cleaners who work for, sometimes below minimum wage, have less access to labor rights than the ones who are employed by the university. And we are seeing just across the board a lot of subcontracting out of these services. So just in the campus alone, in the university that I went to, the office that I worked in was a migrant worker from a subcontracted out cleaning company was earning $13.75. And when I exited that door out into the hallway where it was the custodial staff from the university, they were earning $23.75. So just that division alone, that barrier of just that one door, we're seeing that on campus there is so much stratification, especially when it comes to racial divides and on the basis of immigration status, which is why in order to address the systemic issues of racism, of discrimination, we have to challenge the system that creates these classifications and creates second-class citizenship. And migrants know this, right? This isn't lost on us. We know this, and we know how deeply we're impacted by this, which is why we're speaking up and taking power. I think earlier Amber made this really great point that even just within graduate students, international students are having a harder time accessing TA, GA, ships, and especially for those who are not able to come to Canada because of the border closures and because universities are saying, well, you know, courses are online, and in tandem with immigration that is saying, well, you have no real purpose to travel here. The ones who are not able to get a SIN number or access to a Canadian bank account are not able to get these contracts, the TA, RA, GA contracts, and that's something that we're hearing increasingly so right now. On top of that, the borders recently opened for international students coming from the US, where there is some of the largest outbreaks, as we know, of COVID, but it's close to India, China, and these two countries are compose 56% of the international students who come to Canada. So we see here that on the decisions that are made on such a discretionary basis, without real rationale, that there's so much xenophobia and racism built right into who can even access the campus and who can access decent work on campus. It's no wonder that, you know, migrant students are the ones who are, through the crisis, have had to work in the absence of income supports. We are the ones who have been handling packages in warehouses, delivering food for these gig-based app companies, who have been serving coffee at Tim Hortons and doing very essential work, but without access to essential rights and protections. So we're seeing this all across the board here.
Thanks so much for that, Sarom and Amber.